Don't pet the skunks. Don't you imagine Adam and Eve had some readjustments to do? Don't fool with the beehives and don't pet the skunks. Oh, well, what can I tell you? A little bit of review. Some of you came in the process in the middle of this. And it's not a problem, but it's a good problem to have. So we're looking at a study of Genesis. This is the outline. For those of you who do not realize, basically, one of my, if I have any strong points, it would be in outlining and things like that. And I use all the helps that I can get. One of the helps that I use is the Wycliffe single one-volume commentary. I don't recommend one-volume commentaries because no one person has got knowledge of the entire Bible. It takes all these different people. For instance, if you wanted to study the Gospel of John, you need to look at H.A. Ironside because he devoted his entire ministry to the Gospel of John. Hal Lindsey has devoted his ministry to the Second Coming. There are people who major in various parts. But the Wycliffe commentary is a one-volume. It's excellent for outlining, and I use it quite a bit. That is the outline that I've been using. Chapter 1, God and Creation. Spent a lot of time on that one. Chapter 2, His highest creation. What do you think that was? That's man. 3, human sin. God's love, brother against brother. We are currently on Roman numeral 5, judgment. That's the flood. And hope, and then pride and prejudice, just to steal somebody wrote a book about that one time, pride and attitude or whatever, chapters 10 and 11. Everything in those 11 and a half chapters is found in seed form. Every doctrine, every fundamental, it's all found in the first 11 and a half chapters of Genesis. That's why we study this particular thing, the fundamentals of the faith. We know what the 5 fundamentals of the faith are, don't we? Somebody give me one of them. I'm sorry? No, the 5 fundamentals of the Christian faith. The virgin birth, very important. You've got to believe that. You have to accept that. The virgin conception and the virgin birth. What else? The resurrection. You've got to believe that Jesus came back. The reason for that is because the resurrection is the proof text that the deity accepted the sacrifice. You have to know that the deity accepts the sacrifice in order for it to be effective. And the resurrection is God's stamp of approval on the sacrifice, which brings me to the third one, the sacrifice, Calvary, the substitutionary sacrifice. That's 3 of them. The return of Christ, okay, we're not going to agree on all aspects of that, but we are going to have to agree that He is coming back. And the 5th one, which is the first one, the inspired Word of God. We have to accept an inspired Word of God. Those 5 basic fundamentals are fundamental. Now, Genesis gives us the foundations. The foundations. We have the fundamentals and we have the foundations. Jesus Christ Himself said it this way. If you had believed Moses, you would have believed me, because he wrote of me. Well, when did Moses write of Jesus? Jesus said in John 5, if you had believed Moses, you would have believed me, because he wrote about me. You did not believe his writings. How can you believe my words? When did Moses write about Jesus? Huh? First 5 chapters? What did Moses write? First 5 books of the Bible, the books of the law. And when did he write about Jesus? He wrote of me. Well, Genesis 3:15 obviously is a first example of the proto-evangelium. The seed of the woman shall crush his head. He wrote of me. Now, if he didn't have that verse of Scripture right there, some people might say, well, Moses was just writing history and just writing things, but he wrote about Jesus Christ. And so we know that Jesus himself endorsed the book of Genesis and the Old Testament. So just a little bit of review, okay? In the days of Noah, we know that there was an evil, mankind was evil. As a matter of fact, the Scripture says that his thoughts and intents were only evil continually. Now, God always deals with us in grace. Even in the Old Testament, God deals with us in grace. And he gave us 120 years. He gave man 120 years. That's grace. He granted a reprieve for 120 years. My spirit shall not always strive with man. We dealt with this quite frequently. But he said his day shall be 120 years. But the 120 years eventually ran out. There came a time when the grace of God didn't end. It's just that particular act of God's grace. The time ran out. And the flood occurred. But God always deals with his people, with all people, in grace. Even in the Old Testament, in the days of Noah, mercy won out and 120 years of grace was given. Then after the 120 years ran out, he gave an additional act of grace. Remember that? We haven't come to that, but we've talked about it. That extra week for an additional 7 days. After the ark was finished, the door was wide open and anybody could have gone right in there at any particular time. All right? God's mercy and God's grace can be seen all the way through the Scripture. Now, I'm going to ask you, when you think about this, I'm going to give you one illustration, and that is the illustration that Jesus said in Luke chapter 13. A certain man had a fig tree planted. It says it was planted in his vineyard. I don't know if that's significant or not, but it had a fig tree planted. He came to find fruit on it and could not find any. He said to the gardener, I have come to get fruit off this tree for 3 years and have not found any. Cut it down. Tired of that wasting, encumbering the ground. How does a tree encumber the ground?
Takes all the nutrients.
Does what now, Ginger?
Takes all the nutrients.
Takes the nutrients out, takes the nitrogen out or whatever. And of course there's rotation of crops and so forth. But said this tree I've been coming for 3 years to find fruit on this tree, and it hasn't got any fruit. Cut it down.
He probably got aggravated.
You reckon? I have not found any. Cut it down. Why does it encumber the ground? Why is it drawing nutrients out of the soil when it's not producing any fruit? Steve? That's right. That's exactly right. This particular fig tree was in place. It had the leaves and all the rest of it, and it was taking up space, as we would say, and it didn't have any fruit. Cut it down. Cut it down. Now look at grace. Watch grace. The gardener said, Sir, let it alone this year. Let it alone this year until I dig around it, and King James says dung it, fertilize it, okay, feed it, dig around. What does God ever dig around us? That's just God digging around when things happen sometimes. He's just loosening the old stony soil that's around us, and sometimes he fertilizes and feeds us. That's what church is all about. And as one man said, come to church, get a shot in the arm, get your battery charged or whatever. The gardener said, let it alone this year. Now here's the grace of God. Hang in there for another year. Then if it starts bearing fruit, okay. If not, then you can cut it down. The extended grace of God. All the way through the Bible, you'll find illustrations just like that. Whereas he says, my spirit shall not always strive with man. Yes, I realize that. But if it starts bearing fruit, then okay. Okay, that's fine. In the creation, we went ahead just a little bit there. In the creation, we had lights. We had plants, we had heavenly bodies, animal life, and then we had human life. What was happening there was, just to do this little bit of review here, What was happening, he was building the plant, then he was building the people to work in the plant. He established matter, he established light, put the lights in the heavens, sun, moon, stars, heavenly bodies. The Bible just simply says, and he made the stars also. Just threw them out there. But not just haphazardly did he just throw them out there, because there is a definite order. The Hubble telescope is taking pictures that are incredible, and it shows an incredible amount of order out there that we never knew was there. It just simply says, and he made the stars also. That's in creation. First 6 days of creation. Now, let's go back to the outline just a minute here. Right there. His highest creation, chapter number 2. Then he repeats himself. He repeats himself by putting some meat on the bones. He gives us the outline. He made man. Okay, we understand he created man. Then he comes back in chapters 2 and 3 and 4 and begins to repeat, put meat on the bones about that. I still remember, as I've used the illustration many times, Miss Marjorie McMahon, as she would do this parallelism, as she would talk about the cat that crept through the jungle or the lion that padded through the woods, saying the same thing in different ways. And the Hebrew poetry did the same thing. I don't understand iambic pentameter. I didn't like English literature. I don't care what them people over there wrote about, and I couldn't. They would write stuff that sounded to me like they was on LSD or something. I didn't get anything out of English lit, but people who like English lit would see the beauty of this. And to me, poetry is there was a butcher named Sutton, whose wife was a glutton for mutton. He sneaked up behind her, pushed her in the grinder. No Sutton, no glutton, no mutton. That's poetry. Now that right there is poetry. I like poetry. I wrote that for Head Wheeler one time. Head said it in one of the programs that we used up there, and he got an A, and I didn't get an A. He didn't say I wrote it. He just took it as his own. But that's all right. That's fine. That's poetry. But I don't understand how this parallelism works, but the Hebrews did the same thing. They would make the statement, and then they'd come back and start adding meat to the bones. So he says he created man. Then he goes through the process of how he created man. Interestingly, he created woman out of what? What does the original text say? It doesn't say rib. What does it say? Remember? A curved bone. A curved bone. We have assumed that is a rib, but it was a curved bone. He created the woman out of a curved bone. It's a restatement of the creation of man and woman. Then we have their environment. God gave them a simple marching order: don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and guess what they did? They ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They had to leave the garden. God put angels right there to keep them from going back into the garden to do what? To get to the tree of life. That was an act of grace. That was not an act of punishment. That was an act of grace. God says, lest he get back in the garden and eat of the tree of life and live forever, I need to stop him from getting to that tree. Because man was in sin, and the act of dying was actually an act of grace. Now think about that. You say, well, that's weird. That's crazy thinking. How would you like to live forever getting older every day? See, man was never designed to die. Adam was never designed to die. Man was never designed to have to wear glasses, to have arthritis, to have a cane. Man was never designed to have a headache. Man was never designed to have anything like that. It was designed to live forever and forever and forever. But the day you eat thereof, you will surely begin the dying process.
It took a lot of them a lot of years. Some of them
Oh,
are
yeah.
930 years.
Most of them were over 900 years of age. Abraham was very young when he died, 175. had a child when he was 99.
Yeah.
Well, his wife was, same age. So, yeah, but during that time, they were never designed to die. Man was never supposed to die. Man became a living soul. And so your soul is a living soul. It will never die. You are right now living in eternity, as we've looked at that and we've hashed all that out. Okay, that brings us down to judgment and hope. We're looking now at the flood story, the flood narrative. Okay, all right. Let's keep going here. God said, chapter 6, verse number 7. God said, "I will destroy," and the word means to blot out or wipe totally clean. "I will destroy man whom I have created." Now, question. Suppose I wrote a book. Suppose that I had a book that I wrote. Can I change that book?
Yes.
Why?
Because you're the
It's
author.
my book. I can blot out anything I want to blot out. If I write a sermon, I heard about this kid that was watching his daddy write a sermon out. And he says, "Daddy, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm writing out my message." "Well, where do you get it from?" "Well, God gave it to me." "Well, then how come you're erasing some of it?" You think about that. If it's my book, I can blot it out. I can see what he's saying. I will destroy man whom I have created. God clearly establishes his dominance, shall we say, from the face of the earth. I created man. I can do with this as I choose. He's establishing the fact that he is God. He is in control. And it's going to happen. You've got to understand this. God saw that the wickedness of man was great. And we can't begin. Frankie, we can't begin to understand how wicked man was.
Well, the verse right before that basically says that we were a great disappointment to him. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings
Right.
on the earth.
He repented or changed his method of dealing with him. Because in verse 5 he saw that the wickedness, by the way, the word in Hebrew is rahat, wickedness. That's why you don't like mices and mices and rahats, okay? Because the word rahat, R-A-A-T, it's got a kind of a karate chop, rahat. Kind of, when you talk, it's kind of got that sound to it. It means wickedness. The rahat of man, the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Now, what he's talking about, because he's talking about these men of great renown, he's saying that the leadership of man, and it's always that way. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And he says, I'm going to destroy, blot out man whom I have created from the face of the earth. I'm going to do that because man is mine. I created man. And I am disappointed, I am grieved, I am hurt, I am wounded that man would disobey me, even to the point man and beast and the creeping things and the fowls of the air. For it disappoints me that I have made them. It even goes over to the animal kingdom. That's how wicked this scene was. We can't imagine that. We can't imagine a scene where there is no sin. We can't imagine that, can't we? We can't imagine a garden of it. We can't imagine that. where nobody ever does anything wrong. We can't imagine that. We can't. There's no words that we have in our language to portray that.
But after they were so pure for a while, it doesn't seem like they were worse. What does he think about these days?
What would he think about these days? Oh my. Yeah. We just can't imagine how evil it was to disappoint God that I ever made a man, that I ever made them. Even the animal kingdom is involved in this. What passage is that? 6:7. Let's read it again. He said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping things. Beast would indicate air-breathing things along that line, and creeping things, and the fowls of the air, for it deeply disappoints me, it repents me. I've got to change my way of dealing with them, and I've got to do this, and I don't want to do it, and it grieved God to have to do what he's about to do. But we have no way of knowing how evil man was that was going to cause. It must have been really, really, really. And I'll say this too. The idea is that man was doing it deliberately. It's not that he was making a mistake. It's not that he was doing something he didn't understand. Man clearly knew what he was doing because he knew the difference in good and evil. He had eaten of the fruit. He had the knowledge of good and evil. Man got that knowledge in the garden, so he knew clearly what he was doing. It's not he was making mistakes. He was absolutely wicked and sin. Any thoughts or comments about that? Go.
Yeah, they didn't have anybody to lead them though. Like we have you, and they had Jesus back in the day. They had Paul and all the disciples. They didn't have anybody.
Well, that was the patriarchal system. Adam was supposed to be doing that. And Adam chose, of course, he was going to choose Cain until he killed his brother, so he chose Seth. Seth became the patriarch of the family. It was up to them to do it. That was their leaders.
So did they have some form of government, or?
Yes, there was a human government dispensation. It took place after the Garden of Eden. They lived in that age of innocence. There was a hierarchy established. The birthright went to the oldest son. There is a place in Morgan County for the second sons. It's called Rugby. If you ever have an opportunity to take a day trip, load up the bus and go to Rugby. It's in Morgan County. It was built because the first sons received the inheritance. And if they wanted to dribble it out to the second, third, and fourth sons, they could. But this was a community of second sons. Go, Ronnie.
I bet there was good people in them days too.
Well, I know there was one.
I mean, besides Noah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there was. Enoch. We have a whole hierarchy of some good people, but for the most part, the leaders. That's basically what he's talking about here. The leaders are leading the people in the wrong way. We know we have a hierarchy of a lot of these different things. I don't know of any bad thing Methuselah ever did. Anybody know about Methuselah? It doesn't say he ever did anything wrong. However, God says man is evil. Man is evil, and I'm going to have to destroy him. Go, Ronnie.
Just like today, there's 80% of people say they're good, but they really don't retain God and let God lead them.
Really? 80%?
Well, I'd say there's more, quote, good people,
It's higher than that.
but there's not a lot of them that really follow the Lord.
That's true. It's higher than that. I read a poll where it said about 95% of people feel like they're going to heaven. They don't be involved in salvation. They don't know what that's all about, but they feel like they're good enough to go to heaven. Many people feel like they're going to heaven.
What happened to the souls of the people that he destroyed?
That he destroyed,
Yes.
they are still alive somewhere. Man, the soul never dies. Now, you say, well, that's cruel. Well, you have to think for just a moment. First of all, why did God have to do this?
It was getting out of hand.
Okay? The leadership of the men, he says, it repents me. I'm so sorry that I have to do this. I wish I had. I want you to turn to 6:6. This is an answer to that question. Genesis 6:6. I don't have this on. I can't see that I've got that on the scroll here. Genesis 6:6. Because let's deal with that issue, because it is important to understand. You say, well, God was cruel because maybe this person did not know. Maybe they didn't know. Somebody said it this way, that God checked out mankind and found one. Noah found grace in the eyes of God. Does that mean that everybody else was wicked? Well, I don't know. Did God know that about people? Of course he did. He wouldn't be God if he didn't. Look at verse number 6. It repented the Lord that he had made man. The word repent is the word in the Hebrew which is pronounced naham. Naham. How would you, if I wrote a drama, wrote a play, and I said, Judy, your character is going to sigh in disappointment, what would you do? How would you do that? I want you to sigh in disappointment. Anybody add something to that or take away from it?
Just do what she does to me all the time.
We're disappointed, aren't we? That's why she sighs so much. The word naham means to sigh in heartbreak. It repented. He sighed in heartbreak. It broke the heart of God. You say, well, that's pretty serious. Yes, it is. It repented the Lord. He sighed in heartbreak. Ronnie?
And I believe the reason he sighed was not necessarily because of what they were doing now. He could see that they one day were going to be in hell and burn forever.
So he's looking forward, you say?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
they got no hope without retaining.
All right, but now you've got to answer Jack. Why stop it then, if he's concerned?
If they keep reproducing, there's just going to be more and more people be born and go to hell.
Okay, let's go on with verse number 6. It repented, Naham, it broke his heart that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him. Does anybody have another word in the translation that you have for the word grieved?
Deeply troubled.
I'm sorry?
Deeply troubled.
Deeply troubled. Anybody got another expression there? Grieved, deeply troubled. It grieved, it deeply troubled him at his heart. See that? The word there means it pierced him. In the Hebrew, asab, A-S-A-B, asab. It pierced the heart of God. That is what was going on there. That's why he had to do what he did. Now, what he did was radical. It really was. But if you read it that way, it broke his heart by piercing his heart. It grieved him at his heart, an extreme piercing. His handiwork had been ruined. Man was his handiwork. Man was his crowning act of creation. Man was created to do what? To walk with God, to fellowship with God in the cool of the day, to sit in the cool on the veranda and drink sweet tea and enjoy the fellowship with God. And it pierced the heart of God, broke his heart. It's a picture of what happened on the cross. Jesus did not die from blood loss. Jesus did not die from the fact that they pierced him. My goodness, he could still be hanging there forever. What actually took his life? A broken heart. When they hit him with that Roman broadsword, forthwith came forth blood and water, indicating his heart had broken. So, and then that's what caused him to say this. I have to do this. I have to do this. And he said it not by saying, boy, I get to do this. My heart is broken, and I have to destroy, wipe totally clean man that I have created. I have to do it. I have to do it.
My Bible says that Satan attempted to corrupt the race, that the Messiah could not come to redeem man, but God salvaged a remnant and a godly line. That was Noah.
What are you reading now, Ginger?
King James.
No,
Schofield.
that's the notes from Schofield. Read it for us again there.
Let's see. It said that, let me find my place. It's obvious that Satan attempted so to corrupt the race that the Messiah could not come to redeem man, but God salvaged a remnant, and a godly line was preserved. And that was Noah.
All right, that's the Schofield footnotes at 6:6.
6:4.
6:4. I don't have that. That's fine. What you're saying there is that he salvaged the entire human race to start all over again
With Noah.
because
Satan is
Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now, I'm going to have to come down on Jack's side here for just a minute here. We don't have a side, but that's hard to understand. That's one of those difficult things that we don't want our God to do.
But you think about how a parent feels if a child turns against the teachings and all that they have. There appears to in their heart
If he loves that child, he is.
Yes. And sometimes parents have to turn their kids into jail or into different things to help them. But God...
Boy, that's tough.
I know it is. It just came to my mind about that.
Yeah.
The hurt.
That is, you're really, go Steve.
How much time passed between beginning and getting this bad shape?
About 1,500 years, something like. Yeah, about 1,500. The flood is at or about 4,000. The creation's about 6,000. So in that area, a long time. Enos has been out there. Enoch walked with God for 300 some odd years. So there are some good people, but it is gradually going downhill. So much so that God says, I'm going to totally wipe them out. Now, did he totally wipe them out? All of them?
Except 8,
Why did he choose 8 to stay alive?
because Noah was righteous.
Noah, okay. What about the other 7?
Well, his family, I'm sure they were righteous as well.
You sure?
from a good line.
They were.
I'm not so sure about that.
Not either, but they had to replenish
That's right. But the simple truth is, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. He was the one, and his family was brought in because they chose. You think they could have chosen not to do it?
Yes.
What about anybody else outside? Could they have chosen to go in the ark? Why didn't they?
They didn't believe.
That's the basic concept, is it not? That's right. But look at that old fool out there. What in the world is that thing?
Noah probably told his family they had to go, whether they
Well, then they went kicking and screaming. Now you got another problem now, Ginger. If you don't want to do it, what good is it? So they wanted to do it. By the way, Noah had 3 children, right? Noah had 3 children, right? Yes? Yes? Did he have any more children?
We don't know that.
Yeah, I'd say he
He
did.
had 3 sons, but he could have had daughters.
Well, the daughters would not have been counted in the list of things. And yet everybody came after that from those 3 boys. How long did Noah live after the flood? Anybody remember? We haven't got there yet. He's 600 when he starts. Well, he's 580, 520. So whatever it is, 120 from 600. So he's 600. When he gets out of the ark, he's in there for over a year. He's 601. He died about 900. So there's about 300 years in there that he could have had more children. Did he?
I think
We don't know. We don't know that he did. But everybody else came from these 3 boys, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. You came from one of those 3. You know which one you came from?
the good one.
Come from Ham.
Ronnie, we're all trying to figure out where you came from. We'll get there.
Giants.
The answer to the question is what happened to the souls? Because of their unbelief. Because of their unbelief, any other soul just like them are in punishment. And I'm so sorry to say something like that. I really am.
They would have been more if God had.
I know it, but that's a terrible.
That's actually an act of mercy by God.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying, but that just don't. The man born blind. Who sinned, him or his parents? He was born blind to teach you all a lesson, Jesus said. That's a hard lesson for the man. My goodness, that's a tough lesson to learn. He was born blind and lived to teach me a lesson?
Well, that goes to show you that everything that happens to you is for a reason.
But that's tough. We don't want that. We don't want it to be. We want it to be good, don't we? It's okay. You can say that sometimes we don't understand why God does what he does. Does God send a soul to hell? What does he do then? How come people go to hell? He allows somebody if they choose to do so. Could God stop it?
Yes.
Yes, he could. Why doesn't he?
That's a good question.
Because he doesn't want puppets.
Do what, Claire?
That's not his design. That's not his plan.
That's tough.
But that's,
As a parent, did you ever do something that your children don't understand why you did it?
Always.
They ever ask you why? Why are you doing this?
That's all they say. Why? Why can't I? Why?
This is tough. Now, this is hard stuff. This really is. This is tough. But God says, with a broken heart, my heart is pierced, my heart is grieved. And there are various scriptures I have in the outline here, various scriptures. He says, I'm hard pressed like a cart has run over me. My heart is pressed. Crushed is the word.
But you know, parents have to use tough love sometimes. If a child gets into deep, bad trouble, if you use, it's called tough love. You do something that you know that they're not going to like and you don't like it, but it's going to be for the better. You hope.
Why'd you add that last statement on there, Ginger?
Well, you hope.
Because you do hope. You do hope that it will.
Still have their own mind.
And you
and their
pray
own
that it will.
You're into some. I don't have all the answers. I really don't. If I did, I'd be God. But can you see? You see the dilemma that he is in here. It grieves me. It grieves me to say that. It grieves me to say that this punishment is going to come. I'm just going to wipe them out. And you can imagine maybe an intercessor saying, give them another year, dig around it, let me dig around it this year, and then you come back and see.
But it's going to happen
Because man's evil intentions were only evil continually. Now you say, how did he know? Because he went, apparently he checked everybody out, and Noah found grace in the eyes of God. One man, just one. Now there were others before Noah. I keep coming back to Enoch and other people who walked with God. There were many others who did. But that's just tough. That is hard. Jack, why'd you ask that question? That's bad. Bless your heart. That's why I like Wednesday nights, folks. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. But that's tough. Anything else I can help you with? Noah found favor, acceptance. It starts out with the conjunction of contrast. If something starts with the conjunction but, how is that different from starting out with the conjunction and? But Noah found grace. What does that but mean? It means that there is something else that's happening, but we're going to change the direction. Noah found grace. It was going downhill, but Noah. The conjunction of contrast, it's used many times. There is a conjunction of acceptance, and Noah. But when it says that, it's changing. Everything was going wrong. The intents of man's heart was only evil continually, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. What does that mean? Found favor, found grace? Do what?
He was accepted by the Lord.
Acceptance. He found acceptance. Grace has been there all along. I say again, I'm going to give them 120 years. You got 120 years. Somebody was talking today on the news that when something happens like this tornado, the hurricane did, it just started out as a wave. A week later, it's a Category 4. They didn't have hardly any time at all to get ready. They had a little time, but not an awful lot of time. Not like Florence. They knew basically what that was going to happen and everything, but they didn't have a lot of time to get ready. I talked to my brother last night. He said, we're just going to hunker down, and they're on the West Coast. They got some rain and some wind, but those people, very few of them, and some of them had no means to get out. And so the governor sent buses to try to get them out, the ones that are right there in Panama City in that particular. They didn't have time to really. How would you like to uproot and go?
I noticed all the motels coming to church tonight are full.
Yeah, and the restaurants and everything. We got a lot of foreigners here. But they had 120 years, and then when the ark was finished, they had an extended act of grace, seven more days. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Okay, now from here on, we got 3 minutes, and so we can stop right here. But you have to understand, God is not doing this as a spectator. He's involved with this. This all happens by the act of God. And that's tough. Oh my, we don't like that. I don't like that. None of us like that, to be honest with you. If you'd be honest, you wouldn't like it either. But we want to be nice. We want to be Christian. We say God knows best. We know God knows best. I got it. But do we really got it? It's hard. It really is. Any thoughts or comments?
He's going to do it again, though. He's going to destroy the earth again.
Going to send another flood, is he?
No.
Not another flood?
No, but he's going to.
Because as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. How was it in the days of Noah? Basic. Do what? Evil, only evil continually. If something is only evil, that takes out all the other choices, doesn't it? The imagination of man's heart was only evil. Think about it. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days in the coming of the Son of Man.
Would you go get on the ark if you heard somebody was building one? Would you go?
Now, you've quit preaching and started meddling now, Ginger. I would like to tell you why sure I would have. Just like I would have believed it if my daughter came in and said, Dad, I'm pregnant, but I'm still a virgin. I would like to say, yes, I'd have believed her. Yeah, sure. I don't know.
I've thought about that a lot.
For the first 20 years of my life, I wouldn't have went to the ark. I heard it. Went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday. I knew it. I still said no.
You would not have gone in.
No, not the first 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
I knew the plan of salvation.
See, you're different now.
I am now.
Yeah? They were not different. These people on the outside were not different. Their imagination was only evil continually.
Well, okay. So Noah builds this ark for these people to go in. Now remember Reverend Jim Jones?
Yeah, sure do.
The Kool-Aid thing?
Uh-huh.
They all believed.
Good point.
Not all of them.
I know.
Some of them got away.
Well, I didn't believe. I didn't go.
No, some of them. Some of them got away. Some of them were there and didn't drink the Kool-Aid. So not all of them. But
I
they,
remember that when that happened. I was like, what? That was crazy.
well, they believed in him. They followed him. Many of them were afraid not to. Some of the children were afraid not to.
That's what side the children.
But the imagination of man being evil, again, I say it's the leaders. Basically, it's the leaders. It's the leaders. Now, that's tough on the people who are following, and that's exactly what I'm saying. The man born blind had not done anything wrong to be born blind. It was given as an illustration for us to see what he's about to do. That's a tough lesson to learn. I'm just being honest with you.
What about
Go,
the
Frank.
children?
Pastor, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago that this wasn't judgment. This is God's judgment upon these people. In the New Testament, it says that the scripture was given as an example.
Example.
This is our example that there's no hope for a person that refuses Christ as Savior.
That's a hard lesson to learn, but it's a true lesson.
He's going to serve the same fate.
Now, Frank, you're just a narrow-minded Baptist. You mean to tell me there's only one way? That's so narrow-minded. That's not inclusive.
It's true. But you got to remember it was that way before the world ever even began.
What do you mean now, Frank?
And Christ was going to be our Savior. He was going to be our propitiation.
Oh, you mean God knew about this?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Before-
come on. And he didn't stop it? Why didn't he stop it?
So we would know now that there is a judgment of God.
It's a hard lesson to learn, isn't it?
Amen.
We haven't learned it.
No, we haven't. Well, you have. I mean, you chose to get in the ark. The ark is what? What is the ark? That's Jesus. You got in Christ. You chose to do that. You had the good sense to make that choice. And God didn't drag you kicking or screaming into it either, did he? You made the choice to get in. Anything else about this? Ginger, you were talking before he interrupted you. No.
I don't know.
You don't remember what it was?
He wants to slow down. I'm sorry.
That's no problem. We're just all one here. Anybody else? Wilma, say something. Bless your heart, Wilma. I know you're learning. I realize that. What was you
going?
going? The children? Well,
They
isn't
have an age of accountability, and I believe before their age of accountability, and every child is different.
you have an age of accountability?
Right.
But every one of them died. Now,
But
what happened to them after
before
that?
they were at that age where they could make that free choice.
See, I want that to be true. I want it to be that way. But I don't know. Because I'm going to come right back at you and say, what about the animals? They hadn't done anything. And yet they died. Many of them died.
Yeah, but they don't go to heaven.
or hell, but it's still a tough lesson for them to learn.
Jesus comes back riding on a white horse.
Do what?
Jesus comes back riding on a white horse.
Oh, you believe that?
Yes, sir.
The white horse is a symbol of power, man. That's not literal. You know that.
Yeah, I knew that.
Well, some animals got saved because Mom got bit by a mosquito.
She got a taste of the holy blood, did she? Did he? I can't answer I can't answer that, folks. This is way beyond my pay grade. But I want you to know I enjoy hearing you all try. I do. This is what I like. I like this. Any other thoughts or comments about that? We're not going to get it solved as to exactly why, because it's the mind of God. We cannot equate ourselves to the mind of God. He made the choice because we belong to Him. I'm going to destroy man which I made. It's my book. I can take a line out if I want to. Now that doesn't sound like our God, does it? It doesn't. We just don't want that to be.
Keep thinking I have a lot of questions to ask him when I get there.
Well, when you get to heaven, you'll already know them.
Yeah.
You won't have to ask no questions. You'll already have perfect knowledge.
You won't need to know.
Again, I have to come back and say, they knew what they were doing because they had eaten of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They knew what was right and knew what was wrong. They knew it. They knew it, and they made a choice to go the other way. That's tough.
They had then children that were innocent, that were not old enough to understand right from wrong, and they died in the flood.
I'm going to leave them in the hands of God.
So they went into paradise.
I'm going to have to leave them in the hands. I want it to be that way. I want it to be that way. Abraham was not a Christian.
Nobody in the Old Testament was Christian.
Oh, wait a minute. Well, can they go to heaven? Huh? How?
Jesus preached to them during the 3 days. Abraham believed it is counted to him as righteousness.
Keep going.
Well, that's what I think. Jesus preached to them when he was
And did what?
and saved them and got them out of that paradise or whatever it was. They were in.
I know that Jesus took 3,000 of them as his first fruits offering to God.
That's right. That's exactly right. We want it to be that.
I didn't care.
I'm fixing to straighten out all the problems that she just created right here. No. Abraham believed God, and it was what? Appointed unto him for righteousness. Righteousness was put on his account. Why? Because he believed God. They did not go in the ark because they did not believe God's man, technically God. They had a choice. It's a simple choice. You don't have to drive a single peg. You don't have to drive a single board or anything. You just have to get on the ark. Why? Because it's going to rain. I'm telling you, it's going to. Well, I don't understand it. You don't have to understand. Just trust me. Just believe me. I don't believe. Then you seal your doom.
But it never rained before.
That's right. So that took a lot of faith. It took a lot of faith. But get on the ark because I'm telling you, it's going to come. Well, I don't believe. Well, that's your problem. That is really tough. It's not simple, but it's a simple act of believing or not believing. Abraham believed God, and that's all it took. In the Old Testament, that's all it took. The thief on the cross couldn't have been saved before Jesus died, but when Jesus died, then he could be saved. John the Baptist, do you think he went to heaven eventually?
Yes.
Why? Because he's a cousin to Jesus? Oh, he believed. He believed. There you go. That's the key right there. They didn't get on the ark because they didn't believe. The key word of John, 98 times in the Gospel of John, believe, believe, believe. It's translated by 2 English words, trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way To be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. One Greek word, pisteuo, which means to believe. To believe. You trust him so much, you obey what he says.
Well, the very definition of faith is believing in what you don't see.
Faith is the substance of things not seen. That's right. Any other thoughts or comments? Let me say this. Thank you all. Thank you all for your comments. That's why Wednesday nights are special, guys. We can talk these things. I hope that we can talk some things out and maybe learn some things together. Excuse me. One more. You remember the guy that sneezed 7 times? The girl that was dead sneezed 7 times when Elijah laid on top of her. I usually sneeze 7 times. I don't know why. I just got 2 this time, but I usually get 7 sneezes. I'm just being biblical. Mark, lead us in prayer, my brother. Mark Williams.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for all the many blessings you've given us. We ask now, Lord, that you be with us as we go home. Lead, guide, and direct us the way to be pleasing in your sight, Lord. Give us our sin. Give before you fail and come short. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
By the way, if you ever want to work on the security team, talk to David. Where'd David go? David is around here somewhere. Talk to David. You want to be signed up on the security team? Oh, he's outside. He's on the security team. Okay. See you Sunday.
What was the final answer?